With just 3 simple bolt-on modifications, you can take these engines to about 600 wheel horsepower and about 1,200 torque, which effectively doubles the numbers that it's going to produce straight from the factory. Hey guys, Jake from 80/20 Media here. Today we're talking about performance upgrades for the 6.4 Powerstroke. The 6.4 Powerstroke has a questionable reputation from a reliability standpoint, which we discussed in our video that we did on common problems and reliability of this engine, but surprisingly enough, it actually has a ton of performance potential. As a matter of fact, the 6.4 Powerstroke might be the most capable out-of-the-box plug-and-play diesel that's been made. There's very few serious or expensive upgrades that you need to do to be able to make some pretty significant power out of these engines. A stock 6.4 Powerstroke is probably going to dyno about 275 to 300 rear wheel horsepower, but with just 3 simple bolt-on modifications, you can take these engines to about 600 wheel horsepower and about 1,200 torque, which effectively doubles the numbers that it's going to produce straight from the factory. Now, as you try to break past that 600 horsepower mark, that's when things start to get a bit more expensive. But for the sake of this video, we're predominantly going to cover the basic bolt-on modifications that you can do, but I'll also go ahead and talk about some supporting modifications, some reliability upgrades, as well as some of the things that you're going to need to look into upgrading if you want to push these things beyond the 600 wheel horsepower mark. So first off, jumping into factory power limits. The factory fueling system is very strong. Ford actually used a Simmons K16 injection pump here rather than the standard Bosch CP3 that a lot of other diesel manufacturers had been using at the time. The benefit of the K16 is that it actually outflows the CP3 by about 20%. And they also used piezoelectric injectors with this injection pump, and so the factory fueling system can handle over 600 wheel horsepower before you need to start looking at upgrades for it. And at that point, the only thing that you really need to upgrade is adding a ported fuel rail, and that should easily be able to take you to about 700 wheel horsepower plus. One thing that I want to note with the K16 is the K16 is known to fail definitely a bit more frequently than something like the CP3. While it's not a super common problem, the caveat is that when the K16 fails, it tends to take out a lot of the other fueling components with it. One thing being your piezo injectors, which are very expensive. And additionally, the K16 itself is about $1,500 to $2,000. And so while I have it on the list as a supporting modification, and while some people tell you you don't need a lift pump until you're pushing 600 plus, it's absolutely worth it to get one earlier on just to help take some stress off of the K16 and prevent any concerns with failure. Moving on from fueling, the 6.4 Powerstroke uses a compound turbo setup. So there's 2 turbochargers, and they are good until about 600 wheel horsepower. So long as you upgrade the ported fuel rail, you can actually get a little bit more than 600 on them. And so you really don't need to look at upgrading the turbochargers until you start talking about trying to push 650 plus wheel horsepower. And then one of the big benefits to the 6.4 Powerstroke is the 5R110 transmission, which is good for more than 600 wheel horsepower before you need to start looking at getting a built transmission. So that's a huge factor as to why the 6.4 Powerstroke is so mod friendly. When you look at a lot of other diesel engines, you can really only add 100, maybe 150 wheel horsepower before you need to start looking at throwing on a $4,000, $5,000 or $6,000 built transmission. And so the fact that the transmission, the fueling system, and the turbochargers on this engine are all capable of handling more than 600 wheel horsepower, there really are very few things that you need to look at upgrading to get to that 600 wheel horsepower mark. In addition to that, the internals on the engine are actually very strong as well and can handle more than 700 wheel horsepower. Now, cracked pistons are another common problem, but those tend to only really happen at very high mileages, and it's something that's not common. It is something to be aware of, but definitely not something that gives any cause for concern at throwing a tuner and some bolt-on modifications on here. With that being said, let's go ahead and talk about these bolt-on modifications. The first thing is, of course, going to be tuning. Tuning is where all of your big power gains are going to come from. You've got a couple different options here. For the 6.4 Powerstroke, my preferred tuner is going to be the SCT products, either the X4 or you can get the Livewire TS Plus if you want more advanced monitoring capabilities and something that has a nice touchscreen with it. The basic plug-and-play SCT products have power levels that go up to plus 160 horsepower, and so if you're just looking to bolt something onto there, save a little bit of money and get solid power gains out of it, then just going with one of the pre-programmed SCTs with the factory tunes on there will suffice. But if you really want to dial things in, optimize your engine more, and push beyond 160 horsepower above stock levels, then one of the things that you'll want to consider is custom tuning. You can get custom tunes on these engines for somewhere around $500 to maybe $700, and so if you have some extra budget, it's absolutely worth it to optimize things a little bit more and really maximize the power that you're making that's specific to your engine and your modifications. The second upgrade is going to be a cold air intake. Now that we are running higher boost levels with the turbochargers, it's important to bring more air to the turbos to support them. And so you'll want to go ahead and upgrade the intake system to improve airflow, which is going to help with turbocharger efficiency, turbo spool, throttle response, and you'll even see some minor fuel economy improvements from it as well. We actually manufacture a cold air intake for the 6.4 Powerstroke. It comes with a high quality S&B air filter on it, and we sell it for $299. It's, in my opinion, the best bang for the buck combination of price, performance, and quality that's available on the market. So head over and check that out at boostedperformance.com. And then the third and final modification is going to be a downpipe and a DPF back exhaust system. Now that we're bringing more air in and we're running more boost, we're going to want to reduce back pressure within the exhaust system. And the best way to do that is going to be through upgrading the exhaust. The 6.4 Powerstroke is an emissions vehicle, and so it does have a DPF system on it, as well as some other emissions components. I think you guys probably know what the best route to go is from a performance standpoint, but from an emissions standpoint, keeping everything emissions legal, the best route to go is going to be upgrading the downpipe and then upgrading the DPF filter back portion of the exhaust system. This is honestly a more important upgrade from a reliability standpoint, as it's going to help reduce your EGTs by a couple hundred degrees. And it's going to take a ton of stress off of the turbocharger by reducing back pressure and freeing up your turbo spool. And exhaust is important both from a power standpoint, but also probably even more so from a reliability standpoint. You can get a downpipe and the DPF back portion of the exhaust for about $500. So it's a must-have modification, but fortunately it's not very expensive. So those three modifications right there, tuning with custom tuning, an intake and an exhaust system, can get you right up to around 600 wheel horsepower. I would say that the safe limits without running into some fueling concerns or pushing the turbos a little bit too hard is probably around the 550 wheel horsepower mark. But fortunately, you can get there for less than $2,000. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about some reliability and some supporting modifications. So from a preventative maintenance standpoint, the radiators are very weak on these engines, and so upgrading the radiator will go a long way in help keeping engine temps down and preventing any issues with your factory radiator, as well as the oil cooler. The oil cooler is a big problem because the oil cooler is prone to clogging and failing, which can run into a lot of oiling issues that ultimately lead to these engines completely failing. Making sure you have an upgraded oil cooler is one of the most important things from a reliability standpoint to help keep temperatures down, but also to prevent yourself from running into any seriously catastrophic issues on this engine. And then as we look at other supporting mods for pushing the 500 plus wheel horsepower mark on the 6.4 Powerstroke, we've got a lift pump, as I mentioned earlier. This is something that I would add as soon as you can afford it. Lift pumps do run about $700 to $800, but supporting your K16 is extremely important and it can get expensive when it does fail. Head studs are something that I would recommend. Some people say you also don't need to do this until 600 plus wheel horsepower, but I would say at 500 plus, if you're already in the engine and you can afford it, then adding head studs at that time is important as well. And then if you want to maximize everything else, airflow, fueling, I'd suggest a ported fuel rail, which will be able to take your fueling system to be capable of handling 700 plus wheel horsepower, and then to help free up some airflow, lower EGTs a little bit, and just to better support the turbocharger, some things to consider are an intake horn, a cold side charge pipe, and the up pipes are known to fail, so upgrading the up pipes is good as well, since those can create boost leaks. Those are all a couple of modifications that each one alone is probably only $300, $400, $500. And so even the supporting modifications and things that you can do to really create the most reliable 500-600 wheel horsepower 6.4 Powerstroke aren't really that expensive. It's not until you start trying to push 650 plus wheel horsepower that everything starts to get a little bit crazier expense-wise, but honestly, it's still very affordable relative to what a lot of the other comparable diesels cost to upgrade. If you want to start pushing past those levels, you're going to need to upgrade the turbochargers. Fortunately, the turbochargers can be upgraded for probably about $3,000 to upgrade both of the compound turbochargers. And then the transmission is where things get pretty expensive. It's probably $5,000 to $7,000 to put a built transmission on here. But once you get to the 600 plus wheel horsepower level and you've done all of those other supporting mods that I've talked about, those are really the only two expenses that you have to be able to take this to a 700 plus wheel horsepower engine. Ultimately, while reliability is a little bit questionable, and personally in my opinion, I think these trucks actually aren't as bad as a lot of people say they are. They just have a lot of problematic emissions equipment and then a couple other things that we can go ahead and prevent by upgrading a couple different components like the radiator, oil cooler, adding a lift pump, and things like that. When we look at these engines from a performance and a reliability standpoint, you can actually do some pretty good builds on here at some pretty affordable price points, especially relative to a lot of the other diesels out there where you have to upgrade the turbochargers, upgrade the injection pump, upgrade the transmissions at a lot lower power levels and a lot earlier on in your build process. Anyways, guys, that wraps it up for my video on performance modifications for the 6.4 Powerstroke. If you guys appreciate this content, please click the like button, subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for more videos.